use defending our national security in order to define a public enemy, immigrants, children, criminalize scapegoat. None of this makes us safe. If in fact does anything, it actually creates fear. Trump, Miller, Homan, they're willing to weaponize the government against its own people. 3,800 immigrants were detained in the Chicago area during the terror of Operation Medway Blitz.
DHS-led operation by the former secretary. I was not involved in that operation.
But you work for DHS.
Border Patrol had no involvement other than temporary assigned agents to that.
Including Bavino, correct?
The chair will now recognize the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Ramirez, for her 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Chairman. Watching that video is very difficult because that's my city. And I know what the impact of a city that has been terrorized in the way that it has through Midway Blitz feels like. People are still dealing with the impact. Look, whether it's on the border or in the city of Chicago, for DHS, the threat isn't bound to a destination. Be frank, for authoritarians, threat will always be a demographic. You saw that demographic up there. So this hearing to me isn't really about threats of the northern border. Today's hearing is yet another attempt for my colleagues to use defending our national security in order to define a public enemy, immigrants, children, criminalize, scapegoat, and dehumanize them, sow fear and distrust, surveil and violate our rights and liberties, and then detain and brag about deporting families. When they say threats at the border, national security, and terrorists, we know why these words are specifically being used. They were used in Minnesota when 2 U.S. citizens were killed. It's been more than a year, and I continue to watch parents in my district separated from their high school-aged children with cancer. Not once, twice. Constituents with protections like DACA and new visa applicants illegally detained. 8th graders with autism in my district held in Dilley for months, told at the detention center that if he ever wants to see his mom again, she should go and turn herself in, and they'd go together to Columbia. And constituents, as you just heard from my colleague, pepper sprayed outside of schools, and in that case, outside of a Walmart, all in the name of security. Well, let's be honest, none of this protects our communities, none of this makes us safe. If in fact does anything, it actually creates fear all over the country. This administration has demonstrated it will use our hard-earned tax dollars to terrorize our communities, to fund violations of our rights, and hand out subsidies to the ultra-wealthy and corporations that are profiting from the suffering of our constituents. Trump, Miller, Homan, they're willing to weaponize the government against its own people to ensure that anyone who gets in their way, including that child, ends up shot, pepper sprayed, detained, deported, or dead. But let me be frank, we're going to continue to bring this up in every single committee because we have to hold them accountable. Mr. Holzer, we know that nearly 3,800 immigrants were detained in the Chicago area during the terror of Operation Medway Blitz. Nearly 2,500 people were deported, including 162 children. The New York Times reported that on average, 1,800 arrests are still happening right now per month in Chicago. Local reports suggest that there have been 39 abductions in Chicagoland between June 22nd and June 28th. My question to you, Mr. Holzer, is how many CBP officers assisted ICE during Operation Midway Blitz?
I don't have the exact number in front of me, but we certainly could take that back too. I'll get that for you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I'll put that on the record. You'll bring that back. Let me ask a follow-up so that we have it on the record as well. How many CBP officers are assisting ICE in Chicago now? Do you have that number?
None, ma'am.
Incredibly important to have that information as soon as possible.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Schneider, 5 days before Marimar Martinez was shot 5 times by Border Patrol agent Charles Exum, CBP's open source intelligence team tagged her as a threat based on a social media post, disseminated her photo and information to all of the Midway Blitz personnel, and used DHS databases to confirm her identity. My question to you, Mr. Schneider, is, was the CBP open source intelligence team systematically monitoring social media accounts of people participating in protests during Midway Blitz? Yes or no?
Ma'am, that was a DHS-led operation by the former secretary. I was not involved in that operation.
But
at
you
all.
work for DHS.
It was not in the command and control of the U.S. Border Patrol. I have no information on that specific incident.
So you also don't know how many individuals were tagged as threats like Marimar Martinez.
Can you repeat the question? I couldn't hear.
The second part of that was how many individuals, in addition to Marimar, were tagged as threats like Marimar Martinez. You're saying you don't have that because I was with the previous secretary, but DHS is still DHS, and whether it was one secretary or the other, you were still working for DHS under the previous secretary, correct?
If you're talking specifically about the operation in Chicago last year, that was a DHS-led operation. I had no involvement. The U.S. Border Patrol had no involvement other than temporary assigned agents to that.
Including Bovino, correct?
Yes, former
Yeah.
retired Chief Bovino was.
Correct, but
assigned.
he was there under DHS and you all work for DHS. Look, just to wrap up, we don't get answers and that's part of the problem here. And so I do hope that everything that's on the record in terms of follow-up, we do in fact get. And I know that we're gonna work with the chairman to ensure that happens and our ranking members. With that, I'll yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Kennedy, for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Chairman. As the only member of this committee located directly on the northern border and the co-chair of the bipartisan Northern Border Caucus, it's good to be here today to discuss challenges specific to my community of Buffalo, New York, and across the northern border. My district alone encompasses miles of maritime and land border with Canada, so I understand firsthand the importance of both strengthening partnerships with Canadian law enforcement and ensuring this administration's extreme immigration enforcement agenda does not harm the seamless trade and travel that has always been so critical to Western New York and our nation's prosperity. This symbiotic relationship is extraordinarily important. Every single day, $116 million in merchandise goes across the Western New York border, and billions of dollars of merchandise flows across the northern border expanse. So we stand to lose when this administration diverts resources, harms diplomatic relationships with Canada, stifles lawful trade, and surges agents into Western New York to terrorize our communities. Unfortunately, Buffalo has experienced all of these challenges because of misguided priorities at the White House. Tomorrow is July 1st, Canadian Independence Day, a time of year when Western New Yorkers travel to Canada to visit family and vacation and vice versa. Yet booths at U.S. ports of entry in the north are empty, in part because this administration has diverted hundreds of CBP officers to conduct interior immigration enforcement. So, Mr. Holzer, since January 2025, how many CBP officers who staff Buffalo sector ports of entry have been diverted away from their jobs to conduct immigration enforcement work?
Sir, I don't have a breakdown in front of me of how many from each location, but as of May, we are no longer supporting any interior operations.
Okay, can you give a follow-up in writing, please?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, also, according to ICE disclosures obtained by Cato Institute, over 3,000 CBP OFO personnel were diverted from assisting lawful trade and travel to helping ICE with enforcement back in August of 2025. So I'd like to see how those numbers add up to August of 25 and then how they've changed, if at all, since.
10-4, so that number is very, very high.